Chapter 8, Lesson 6, Write and Graph Inequalities. That is our topic for today. Now, the first section of that is writing inequalities. Writing inequalities isn't different than when we learned how to write expressions and when we learned how to write equations. Okay, we're going to have a first step, and our first step is going to be to identify a variable. So I'm going to write that down. Step 1, you should write this down as well. Step 1 is going to be to identify a variable. And then step 2 is that you can write the inequality. So you may want to pause your video for a second, take that down. We've got step 1, identify your variable, and then step 2, you can actually go and write the inequality at that point. And so what I mean by that is, given an example like you must be over 12 years old to ride go-karts, okay? So what is the unknown? You must be over 12 years old to ride go-karts. We're gonna say, let A stand for age. Let A equal age, because that's the variable I want to use, A for age. Now, it doesn't matter. You could pick something else, but I'm going to use A for age because it's very generic. You could also put let X equal age because it doesn't have to match the letter. And then, if I must be over 12 years old, well, what inequality symbol does that equal? Over sounds like greater than. So my age must be greater than 12. Age greater than 12. Okay, now for you all, we have to remember that you learned 4 different signs yesterday. You learned a greater than, well, you knew that already, but a greater than and a less than. But you also learned a greater than equal to and a less than equal to. Okay, we learned all of these signs yesterday. So it's important to try to think about the question and say, well, is it suggesting that it could be equal to this value, or is it saying it must actually be over this value or under this value? And so that's I think going to be the biggest trick for you all today, is just trying to think about, is it greater than or is it greater than or equal to? So since this one says age greater than 12, it says over 12, that means you can't be 12. You have to be bigger than 12, older than 12 in order to do it. So we're going to do another example, and that example is going to come right off of your lesson 6 homework practice, which is the packet I sent home. Now, if for some reason you don't have that packet, just send me a message and I'll send you the worksheet for the day so that you don't have to try to find it. But we're going to do question number 2. We're going to do 2. So this is question 2 from your homework practice. It says her earnings were no more than, I'm going to write that down, no more than $64. So we have to think that through. First of all, I'm going to use maybe E for earnings. That's your call. It doesn't have to be, but I'm going to use E for earnings. Let E equal earnings. So now we can say her earnings are something to 64. Now we don't know what that is yet. We have to think about it. What does no more than mean? To me, if it's no more than, it means it can't be any bigger, so it must be smaller. So I know it's going to be a less than sign. I just have to think about, can it include? So if it says no more than 64, does that include the 64 or does it not include the 64? To me, if her earnings are no more than 64, I know that they can be 64. They just can't be bigger than that. So we get to make that a less than or equal to sign in this case. Okay, earnings is less than or equal to in this case. So now would be a really good time to pause your video and try the other questions from this section. It's numbers 1 through 6. I just did number 2 with you, but I'm going to go on to the next example, and it's going to be graphing these. So now if I had to graph this on a number line, that's going to be our next challenge for today. So I'm going to go ahead, grab my next piece of whiteboard. Got lots of these from school. And we're going to go ahead and do a question like n is greater than 9. Okay, this is a random example just to kind of get you the idea. When we're graphing inequalities, we graph these on a number line. Okay, so we're going to just draw a number line horizontally. And we're just going to include some numbers around 9 on that number line. We don't have to have every single number. We don't have to include 0 and negative numbers. It just depends on what the inequality is. So this time I'm just going to include like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, there's no exact right answer here. You could be putting other numbers on here. As long as 9 is somewhere in there, you're good. So from here, if n has to be greater than 9, I know that there's going to be a dot on the 9. And then I'm going to have to go towards the greater direction. Okay, that's how we graph inequalities. But there is something that you need to know before we actually graph that. When we graph with a greater than or a less than symbol, we use an open circle to graph. I know, it looks like an emoji. You'll see in a moment. And when we graph with a greater than equal to or a less than or equal to, we used a filled in circle on the graph. And yes, that didn't help. It still looks like an emoji. But this is what I mean. When we put a value, a dot right there on the 9, we're going to have to use an open circle to graph this. And this is really important that we keep that circle open, because what we're saying is that it has to be bigger than 9. It cannot include the 9. If we draw a closed dot on the 9, we're saying 9 counts. And in this case, 9 doesn't count. So I draw an open circle on that 9, and then I fill in and I make that line thicker so it's really noticeable. But for you guys, you could do it also with like another color. And I show that it's an open circle on the 9 and then everything shaded this way. And then I color in that arrow so I can really tell the direction that it's going. And that's how we graph something like n greater than 9. So we're going to try another one so that we still understand that. Guys, I think it's really important though that you take a moment to write this down so that you don't get that confused in the future. The open circle means it does not include that point. And the closed circle means it does include the point. So maybe take a moment to write that down. And we're going to move on to the next example. So the next example is going to be question number 9 on your lesson 6 homework practice. I'll do question 9. That'll be our second example for this. Question 9 says b is greater than or equal to 13. So I'm just getting started by drawing out a number line. Now take a moment to think, what numbers are you going to use on that number line? It's by 13, so I'm gonna say any numbers near 13 are fine. You get to make that call, so let's go with 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, that's just the start. It's getting you set up. You don't have to graph it perfectly. You don't have to use graph paper in this case. You could just use your lined paper. But I set that up. Now, greater than or equal to 13 means that I have to think greater than or equal to, does that include the 13 or does that not include the 13? And in this case, it does include because it's equal to as well. So we get to put a nice closed circle on that 13. And then it's greater than, so we're going to have to go towards the bigger numbers to show that it's values that are bigger than 13. Okay? So you're going to give that a try today. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to hop on to our 10:30 call. We have a 10:30 call every day that will go over questions or go over questions from the previous day. But all of your work is due by 7 p.m. So please make sure you get that in on time and have a great day.